After the panel, Rohingyas speaking for themselves, we have now the second panel, which is on Burmese for inclusive and multiculturalist society. So to say, another side of the story, and to see how solidarity can work and how Burmese can also work for an inclusive and multicultural society. The chair is Yawnghwe. He's an executive director of the Euro-Burma office in Canada. Thank you for being here with us. And Aidan, who is a program, can't be here, but here with us is Khin Mai Aung. She's a civil rights lawyer and writer from New York. Thank you for being here with us. And also with us is Professor Kyaw who is here because Kyaw Aung couldn't make it to the conference. This is a smaller panel, so we hope that we will be timely for lunch. I think everybody needs it after all this excitement that we had. I was just asked to tell the people to enter more and a more nicer dialogue, and I am of the opinion when the things we are talking about are so terrible. We're talking about atrocities. We're talking about genocides. I don't know how to discipline emotions that come up. So I think we will try to enter a dialogue, but if there are emotions in the room, they should be ventilated. I give the floor to Yawnghwe. Thank you for being here with us.
Hello, Mingala Bashin. My name is Aidan, and I am a PhD fellow in English at Brown University in America. I apologize for not being with all of you in person on this very important day. It is my honor to present alongside such brave scholars and activists, some of whom are foundational thinkers in my own academic fields. I focus on the intersections of Asian American, post-colonial, and religious studies specifically concerning the diaspora of Burma. I am also a co-founder of the interfaith advocacy group, Sada Buddhists for Peace. As the daughter of immigrants from Burma, who is of half Bama ancestry and was raised Theravada Buddhist, being Burmese has always been a marker of my difference in the US. It was something that made me a racial other in a country founded on slavery and the deaths of native lives, where I had no sense of my own people's history as Americans. I grew up feeling othered for my appearance, culture, and religion by white American society. It is thus very painful to be faced with another far more brutal case of othering, this time in the country of my heritage, where people of my ethnic and religious background comprise the majority. My experiences as a member of a marginalized minority in the US drives my decision to speak up in support of the Rohingya people, who have endured degrees of state-sanctioned cruelty and violence that I have never known. While I cannot speak for the Rohingya, I can show my solidarity to them and other ethnic minorities in Burma by asserting that their persecution is also an Asian American issue, and as Asian Americans, we must not remain ignorant to their plight. I think framing it in this way is important, considering the thousands-strong diaspora of Burma who reside in America. This population includes increasing numbers of Rohingya refugees in places like Chicago, Illinois, Fort Wayne, Indiana, Utica, New York, and others. Like many individuals who have lost their homes, seen family members murdered, and been treated with the utmost inhumanity, many Rohingya and other refugees from Burma who now live in America still suffer from much emotional trauma and depression. On top of this, they are struggling to adjust to life in an entirely new country, find jobs, and support their families. Such sacrifice and brave efforts are at the heart of Asian American experience and deserve our recognition and support. In addition, I believe reaching out to these communities should involve genuinely learning about each person's story, should they decide to share it, and understanding the ways ethnic and racial identity is enforced in Burma, and the further discrepancies of how it translates to life for them in America. Since the creation of a census category in 2010, people from Burma are all grouped together on US documentation as being Burmese. For many, the title Burmese is synonymous with being Bama or Burman, and it is the dominance of Burman identity, culture, religion, and language that the Tatmadaw seeks to assert over ethnic minorities. This is a tactic that many of them know as Burmanization, and the resulting conflicts between the Burmese military and ethnic armies in the country is what caused many of these refugees to leave Burma in the first place. Thus, many are not likely to want to brand themselves as Burmese in America. Furthermore, while ethnic Burmans are the predominant group in Burma, when it comes to the US, people like me are outnumbered. Most individuals who are perceived as Burmese in this nation are Theravada Buddhist Burmese Chinese, who arrived in the US as the first major wave of immigrants from Burma in the 1960s. They were made to leave the country because of legislation that invalidated their property rights and citizenship. Burmese Indians were also at one time systematically expelled from the country, and they are also one of the subgroups that make up the population of Burmese in America. We should always respect an ethnic group's right to self-identify and preserve their language and culture in whatever country they call their home. Therefore, I understand and support ethnic minorities from Burma in America wanting to reject the term Burmese in reference to themselves, instead deciding to proudly call themselves Karen, Rakhine, Kachin, Chin, Karenni, Mun, Shan, and so forth. For the Rohingya especially, the right to self-identify is denied by the Burmese military in a murderous campaign that seeks to erase their entire existence as a legitimate ethnic group in the country. Here in America, they are free to openly declare themselves as what they rightfully are. However, I believe that if they so choose, all peoples, whether they be Rohingya or Karen or Chinese or Rakhine or whichever ethnicity, have as much claim to Burmese American and Asian American identity as me, or any other person with ancestry from Burma who calls the US their home. It is a great shame that our diaspora remains divided along the lines of class, ethnicity, and religion, with many Burmese Buddhists retaining feelings of superiority over Burmese Christians and Burmese Muslims, and harboring nationalist, Islamophobic, and racist sentiments towards the Rohingya specifically. As a more united people, we could present a picture of abundant diversity with many different languages and cultures, and one that I would be happy to share alongside Rohingya people. We diaspora of Burma are of many different faiths, not just Buddhism, but also Christianity, Islam, and Hinduism. Among us are children and grandchildren of refugees, immigrants, activists, freedom fighters, and political dissidents who had to abandon the troubled land of their birth to build a better life for their families in America, like my parents did for me. While the hateful voices of certain nationalists and racists are loud, they do not speak for all Burmese. Furthermore, there are many Burmese, myself included, who are willing to show sympathy and solidarity with the Rohingya as much as we are with all suffering ethnic peoples in Burma. We also want to combat persisting strains of Burmese nationalism and prejudice within our diaspora, and in spite of how divided we seem as a whole, there are indeed still communities here in America where all different people from Burma have forged strong friendships that transcend ethnicity and religion. I am a Burmese Buddhist of mixed heritage, Bama and Mun. I have grown up around multi-ethnic family and friends, Mun, Rakhine, Burmese Chinese, Burmese Indians, Buddhists, Hindus, Christians, and Muslims. Though defenders of the Myanmar military justify their actions as being done to preserve traditional Burmese Buddhist society, I and other Burmese Americans like me see them for what they really are, crimes against humanity. The society that I wish to see flourish is one that is fair and inclusive to people of all ethnicities and faiths, one where Buddhism is not manipulated by a military regime. No part of the Dhamma teaches us to privilege one ethnic identity over another. This violence will not be done in my name. As an Asian American, I implore that my fellow Asian Americans not view the struggles of Rohingya refugees as so alien to our own. Part of why the Rohingya, other ethnic minorities, and various immigrant populations in Burma have faced large-scale displacement, expulsion, and erasure is because they have been viewed as distinctly un-Burmese. Is this a concept so unrelated to Asian American history, which has taught us about Japanese American internment, the Chinese Exclusion Act, and demonization of South Asian migrants, which all occurred because these individuals were seen as threateningly un-American? Do we not recognize the common plight of refugees escaping genocidal violence and war, just as many Cambodian, Vietnamese, and Laotian Americans did? And are we also not still living in a country in which our fellow Muslim Americans face rampant Islamophobia and our government propagates increasingly anti-immigrant and xenophobic sentiment? It is our responsibility to see these parallels and stay informed of what is happening in Burma and how Western nations are also complicit, especially as more and more immigrants and refugees from Burma arrive in the US. We must reach out and have open dialogues with their communities. We must take care of each other. America is their home as much as anyone else's, and we must make sure their struggles are not rendered invisible. Thank you.
Good morning, Minglaba. My name is Khin Mai Aung, and it's a pleasure to be here amongst all of you, many of whom have done great work in the field of human rights generally and with regard to Myanmar specifically. And I'd like to share some thoughts about how I, as a Burmese Buddhist, my own journey to do this work, and some my own point of view that's been shaped by my own ethnicity and religion. So I'm Burma and Rakhine, a little bit of Shan, and I left Burma as a young child. I'm currently a civil rights lawyer in New York City, where for many years I worked at the Asian American Legal Defense and Education Fund, where, among other things, I worked on to fight anti-Muslim profiling in New York City after September 11. I now do civil rights enforcement for immigrant students for New York State. I'd like to clarify that I'm speaking on my personal behalf now and not on behalf of my employer, the state of New York. And so what I'd like to do is apply my knowledge as a civil rights lawyer, domestic civil rights lawyer in the United States to this context. And that's been my framing in my work on this issue, which has involved a series of articles this fall, or last fall, on the Rohingya crisis, and which I hope to continue. So I followed what happened in Burma during the transition to democracy, but I have to admit that even though I was aware of the Rohingya crisis mounting, in the early part of 2017, I was really more focused on the white nationalism that was rising in my own country after as President Trump was elected. And it was only last fall when the September 2017 ARSA attacks occurred and the massive crackdown occurred afterwards that it became evident that this was of unprecedented scale and it was a bloodbath that had been building for some time. And I was really struck by the stark disparity between the dominant Burmese narrative, both in Myanmar as well as in the diaspora, and that of just about everyone else. And I do want to note, by the common Burmese narrative, I'm excluding ethnic minorities from Burma, which my friend Aidan has already spoken about. So as I mentioned, I currently do civil rights enforcement for New York State. And so through that work, I have the opportunity to interface with quite a few people from this community, Karen, some Rohingya. In upstate New York, I think the Burmese community, or the refugees from Burma, are predominantly from the Karen community, but there's also some Chin, Kachin, Rakhine, a mix. And I spoke to some of these people that I work with about their views on current events in Rakhine State. And for the most part, they're very sympathetic to the Rohingya, and they empathize because of the persecution that their own communities have faced, and they themselves have faced in some cases back in Burma. And going back to the prevalent Burmese narrative, I on my social media, from family and friends, I heard horrifying racism, patently false narratives that we've all heard, but I don't want to repeat unduly here, comparing the Rohingya to vermin and stereotyping all of them as terrorists. And including from educated, well-traveled people who've been exposed to a diversity of ideas and perspectives. I was aware of the rise of Mabata and Burmese nationalism and the right-wing populism in Burma before last fall, but I kind of put it at arm's length in my mind. I think I made the same mistake that many of us liberals in the States made about white nationalism and right-wing populism in the United States as well, because I saw it as a fringe movement. I knew it was out there, I knew it was growing, but I didn't realize just how potent it would be, and that we would have a right-wing nationalist as our president in the United States. And similarly, in this case, I did not realize just how mainstream in the Burmese community, both in Burma and abroad, these views are. And while of course they're not universal, they are certainly mainstream and widespread. I would like to note that there is a small but very vibrant resistance, if you will, some of whom are here with us today and who I've gotten in touch with back in the country, which I have found just very heartening and inspiring. As AA mentioned, we Burmese in the United States, regardless of whether we're Buddhist, regardless of whether we're Bama back home, we're minorities in the States. And I left Burma when I was 4, and I lived in Malaysia for a while, but then I came to the United States when I was 7. So I've lived the vast majority of my life there, living as a racial minority. And so I thought about how I want my white friends in the States to respond to incidents of racism and discrimination. And that has what's guided me in my actions, in my writing, in my dialogues with Rohingya friends and Burmese community members, that I want to be that ally from within the majority community. And this work has been really wrenching and personal for me because I think unlike a lot of my colleagues here who've been doing this work for many years, I came to it kind of late. I was very focused upon my own work in the United States on the racism and anti-immigrant bias in the United States, on fighting that on behalf of Asian Americans for a long time when I was at the Asian American Legal Defense Fund, and now more broadly, enforcing civil rights laws in New York State. So it's really made me see just how inflexible Burmese nationalism is, and how the depth of the racial inequity in the country, not limited to the Rohingya. And so my goals in writing about this and talking about this, in working with all of you, I have several different goals. One is to kind of help explain the nuances of the Burmese perspective to the broader public, acknowledging and identifying and addressing contentions that I don't agree with sometimes, but which often have roots in valid grievances in the past that may or may not have anything to do with the Rohingya. It's also to find other Burmese people, especially but not limited to Buddhists, who want to join with me in this effort. And finally, and I think this is maybe the most challenging part, to open a dialogue with all Burmese people based on principles, fact, and reason. And what I would like to say is that if you're Burmese, and whether you're here today in person or whether you're listening via the webcast, I ask you to consider these thoughts that I'm about to say. And you may not agree with me with most of what I'm saying, and that's fine. But I think that I want you to consider that talking openly about ethnic grievances in Burma or about Buddhist extremism isn't an attack on the Bama. It isn't an attack on the country itself. And it doesn't mean that everybody in the country feels this way, but we need to be able, or it's not a generalization that everyone in the country feels this way, but we need to bring these issues to the surface in order to address them. And not talking about them or pretending they don't exist is only going to exacerbate the tension that exists in the country today around ethnic issues. I'd also like to put out that acknowledging massive and verified human rights abuses doesn't make someone one-sided with regard to the Rohingya crisis. It's just these are facts that have been well documented. And acknowledging the specific injustice the Rohingya suffer doesn't negate the inequities and challenges faced by many people, Buddhists, Hindus, Christians in Burma, and specifically in Rakhine State due to the unrest there. And also, acknowledging anti-Muslim bias throughout Burma doesn't negate the fact that interfaith relationships and friendships have existed there for some time, and that for most of the history, people have more or less coexisted there peacefully. Based on my domestic work in the United States on racial and social justice, I know that tolerant open civil societies and democracies aren't built on racial scapegoating. Nationalist support for the military may be surging right now, and there may be this veneer of being united in this idea of Burmese nationalism. But in the long run, the country will not be able to build the strong democratic institutions it needs on this current course. So I hope that more people, Burmese and others, who believe in the idea of a pluralist, diverse Burma, will help in push back this tide of nationalism, of right-wing populism, and help the country and its good citizens change course. Thank you.
Thank you, Khin Mai Aung. I won't be speaking on this panel, I'm just a chair, but I'd like to introduce our speaker, next speaker. In Myanmar, the top general is called a senior general. He's a senior. So right here we have our senior activist for democracy from Burma. Yawnghwe has been fighting for democracy in Burma and for all the different ethnic people for an inclusive society since the 70s. He was the inspiration for my getting involved in the movement. Thank you.
Are you trying to tell me that I'm an old man? Thank you anyway, Harn. Before there were people on earth, there was earth. Before there were people that now inhabited Burma, there was nothing but land, rocks, waters, rivers. People came from elsewhere. All the people that inhabit the land, which today we call Burma in the English language, came from somewhere else or descended from those who came from somewhere else. That's a fact. I'm not a paleontologist. My discipline was psychology. I taught it for 30 years. I'm a retired old man now. They call me Professor Emeritus. The only privilege I have on my institution is a free parking space whenever I am on the campus. And believe me, parking space is at a premium. What I am trying to say is this. Our land, which in the English language we call Burmese. Can you hear me without this thing here? Oh, you need it for, my goodness. Well, let me get back to the fact. The land that the people I like to walk around when I teach. I go to the student who is falling asleep and I wake him up with my yell real loud. Anyway, Burma is a land inhabited by many ethnic peoples. The Kachin do not call themselves Kachin. Do you know what they call themselves? Jingpo. Do you accept that fact, young man? Your name is what you call yourself, and I respect and acknowledge it. Therefore, you must also acknowledge my name, what I call myself. I am Yawnghwe, Burmese name. Americans don't know how to pronounce it, so I said, just call me Win. The Karens do not call themselves Karen. You know what they call themselves? Anybody? Let's see how educated you are. They call themselves Kyaw. I am half Kyaw, Pok-Kyaw. Do you know what they call the Burmese, the Burmans? Anybody? I thought I was among people who are very... The Karens call the Burmans Payaw. Get it? That's a linguistic fact. So what I am trying to say is this. That young man raised the question, we never heard of Rohingya before. Of course not. We never called them Rohingya when we spoke at the Burmese. Do you know what you call them? We call them Koto. You know, Nalela, Diosa. The Aguturu Koturu, Rohingya lo kore lue, do Turu, Rohingya lo mabyo wu. Turu do Koto Galari lo kore. Rohingya is the name they use for themselves when they speak in their language. How did they get that name? Who knows? How did Burma get its name, Burma? Some say, speculations that it derives from Brahma. the religion that we profess, the majority of people profess in Burma, is an imported one. Do you know where it came from? It came from India. When I was young, I was made to believe that Baya Natipye, Benares, where much of the Buddhist literature and traditions derived from, was almost part of the country we call Burma, or Tuvana Bhumi, Suvara Bhumi. Tuvana is, they say it's gold. I'm not sure. I'm not a linguist. Anyway, we are a country of immigrants. We all came from somewhere else. We descended from people who came from somewhere. My maternal grandmother used to tell us stories when we were very small. She said, my great ancestors came from a land far away. How did she know? Her great-grandmother passed down oral history. They crossed a big, vast area of sand. In the daytime, it is very hot. At night, it's very cold. I could not imagine at my young age of 4, 5, 6 what she was talking about. Now I know. They crossed the Gobi Desert. They came from way up north to come down south. If you go to Indonesia, in Sulawesi, Celebes Island, if you study their weaving, the way they build their houses, you will find similarities between them and the Kyaw people, the Karen people of Burma, the way they build their houses. I've been there. I've been to many places in this world. So what I'm trying to say is this. Rohingya, Koto, whatever you call themselves, they are who they say they are. There is physical evidence. Physical evidence. It's published in your program, Buchanan. He spoke of people. He wrote about the people in the Asiatic Society Journal. That these people, they said they are these people. What they are saying is this: their name was the land that we call today Yakhang in Burmese, Rakhine in Afghanese. They called it Ro. There were 3 guys here, Ro. And then I said, what is the meaning of Ja? In their language, Ja means native of. So Rohingya, when they say, they are telling us that they are natives of that piece of earth on the western coastal line of Burma, is Rohingya. We are natives of Rohan, Rakhine. That's where Rohingya comes from. Okay. I already told you that I'm half Korean. I'm proud of it. I spoke 2 dialects of Korean. I spoke Japanese during the Japanese occupation. I pick up spoken languages easily. I'm married to an Indonesian woman. I speak Indonesian, but she thinks my Indonesian is very funny. So I don't speak to her Indonesian. So what I'm trying to say is this. Religions, thinking are man-made. We were not born with a religion. Some people will dispute that. Go ahead and dispute it. I will listen to you. I'll respect your disputation, but our physical evidence is indisputable. Look at my face. Do I look like a Scandinavian? Do I look like a Norwegian? Some people think I look Japanese. Well, watakushi wa no nihon I can speak a few Japanese words, but that's about it. So Burma is a land of many peoples. They say 135. I don't know where they pull that 135 out, but let it be. I'm not going to argue with that because I'm not about to go there and count them. So that's why we need to live together. We need to respect each other's religion. You don't have to agree with them. That's your privilege. If they want to eat chicken curry on Friday, let them eat chicken curry on Friday. If you want to eat vegetarian on Saturday, that's fine too. These things are immaterial. We have survived for centuries. So these are the things that Burma is made of. Do you know who the original people that were in the United States? I've lived in America for about 50 years. They were not white people. Do you know where they came from? They probably came from the same source of the people, some people that inhabit Burma today. I see you nodding. Are you agreeing with me? Okay. Now, this is not a debate here. If you debate with me, let's do it somewhere else. This is a presentation of facts and our opinions here. Listen respectfully to the questions, answers, raise your questions, but this is not a forum for debate. That's another place. So we have this conflict in Burma. This is not only against those people who call themselves Rohingya in their language. This is also against the other people, the Kachins, the Jingpo, which they call them, the Chin. There are more Chins in the state of Colorado than they are left behind in Chinland, because they have been eased out. And genocide doesn't have to be lining all of them up and gas them. I have been to Dachau, I have been to Auschwitz, I have seen it. The physical evidence is very incontrovertible. It's there. This very place here honors the memory of those who perished. This is going on in Burma, my friends. It is going on. It is a slow genocide. Genocide is a way of getting rid of a certain people either very rapidly or slowly. How do you do slowly? Well, deprive them of their livelihood. You cannot go to work. You cannot go and get an education. You must marry with permission. If you marry outside, you must not do this. You must not. These are all man-made. So whether you like them or not, that's not material. They have the right. They have the right. Just like the Padang with the long neck have a right. They don't speak Burmese. I've met many of them. At first, they were coming out to Mae Hong Son area. Now the Thais make money out of them by charging admission to their villages to take pictures. You know what I'm talking about, the Padang. And National Geographic had the temerity to say that they were really disputed. I challenged them. I said, you are wrong. It's not a series of rings. It's just one long thing, just fitted round and round and round and round. That's what it is. Those rings are not individual. They're just one ring. I'm talking about the long neck, the Padang people. Now, religion. I don't know of any religion that you have to kill. I don't know of any religion. The Old Testament in the Judeo-Christian tradition says eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. Well, who wrote the Bible anyway? People. And the culture of their time at the place where they lived is all reflected in the things they do. Whether you pray 5 times a day or 25 times is immaterial. The important thing is you pray. And what do you do when you pray? You are talking to somebody larger than you that is incomprehensible to your brain. So we ascribe to that. We call it by different names. Some people call it God. The Native Americans said the Great Spirit. I'm not going to argue with that. I have never seen God. Have you? God is not an anthropomorphic figure to me. Sitting down on the throne, I go in there, this and that. But if you want to do it, that's fine with me too. I am a universal. So what I'm saying is this. Religion, as George Soros, that Hungarian Jewish philanthropist, rich man, says, religion was created by man. Well, he's not wrong. Women too, for that matter. Religion came after human beings. Before there was religion, there were human beings. Before there was human beings on earth, there was land. We go and if you believe in Charles Darwin, we all came from apes. I don't hear any objections here. Well, anyway, what I'm trying to say, Burma is a multicultural, multi-religious society where we had at one time lived in peace, in harmony, until those troublemakers want to gain space on wherever they want to do and get very wealthy and say, we got to get rid of those guys. What they want is their land. That's a bottom line of it. So I will stop here before I die. Thank you very much.
Do we have time for questions and answers? Or? We've got 10 minutes. All right. So are there any questions that we can?
Are there any answers?
So I guess we can stop. Oh, there's one. Yes, sorry, please.
I was just wondering if you could brief normally in many countries, there will be very oppressive rulers. But then again, you will see people resisting that, opposing that. Even in Israel, there are people who are sort of. So in that context, I was just wondering that what is your take on that, if you could tell us, because that's where the hope should lie, the resistance from within. Those of us who are outside, we could do something as much, but not that much that they can do. That's what I'm asking. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Abrar. I take it that was for me? I mentioned in my presentation that there is a small but strong community of pro-diversity, pro-inclusion people in the country that are working on this issue. I've had some interactions with some of these individuals, so I'd be happy to talk about that, though, of course, I live in the United States, and there are other people actually here at the conference who are coming from Burma who probably would be better equipped to answer the question, though I will not put my colleagues on the spot here. So as I started to do my writing on this, mostly in the Huffington Post, I and Aidan, my friend who spoke earlier, have connected with a number of people, mostly using social media. Facebook, as you know, is very popular in the Burmese in Burma. There's quite a few hateful Burmese sites on this topic, but there's some groups, mostly kind of private groups one that I'm involved in, of people of Burmese extraction across in the country as well as across the world, who use it to communicate about different things. I think as far as within the country, again, I'm at arm's length, so from talking to some of these individuals and interviewing them for some of my writing, I'm actually hoping to come out with a piece soon, collecting interviews of people in the diaspora and in Burma on this topic. But I think that I think we all agree that it is a minority of people that are who have a divergent view, that are in this resistance, so to speak, but it's larger than it seems, because I think that people are either afraid of some kind of military repercussions or just social backlash. Like one young woman that I interviewed for my upcoming article said that she's been called out in public by strangers for her feelings on this topic. I also think that because the country lived under it's still under military, domination, but under strict military control for a very long time, it doesn't have the strong civil society foundations to carry on this debate about the country. Like there isn't a culture where I think people find it easy to distinguish fact from state propaganda, which for so long was the norm as far as the news. But and I also think that there's journalists. There's a number of journalists who aren't necessarily advocates, but I think some of you may have read about some of them who've been jailed since the fall. They're journalists that work to document what's happening. So they're kind of documentarians, but I think that they are very much for open dialogue and truth. And I think that one thing, just from my conversations with people there, have been struggling with is this role of ethnicity and grappling with it. And I think that there are some people there who believe that kind of, the exploitation, so if you will, on either side of ethnicity is a bad thing, right? And I think that I think people in the United States say that, or in the West, that say that as well. Sometimes it's this idea of this this colorblind notion that we're all the same, and that talking about ethnicity and differences and inequities is somehow exacerbating those tensions instead of making them better. And I say that because I think that from my limited experience in interactions with people in Burma, I think that this is something that even among civil society institutions, they're still grappling with, like how to talk about and acknowledge these issues. And there's, I think, some level of debate as well. So sorry to be so long-winded.
Can I just make two very brief comments, because the issue of Rohingya identity has come up over and over again, and it will, be raised by other people as well. Just two comments. Ethnicity 101, basic text, or sociology or any cultural studies would say that any ethnicity would collapse in the face of a rigorous examination. So the fact that only Rohingya identity is questioned, but not the Burmese or Rakhine or other, itself, I would argue, is complicit act in the state's frontal attack on the validity and the right of the Rohingya people to call themselves. That's the number one point, yeah? Yeah. The second point, we cannot do much from outside. Only the Burmese civil society, in quotes, can fight this battle. I disagree categorically. In most, or I would say in all genocidal cases, from Armenia in 1915, Cambodia 1974 to 73 to 78, or like 74 to 78, Indonesia 1964-65, 1971 Bangladesh, Rwanda, Kosovo, and last but not the least, 27 January 1945, when the Soviet Red Army overran Auschwitz, the temple of genocide. When societies commit this level of acts of barbarity beyond imagination, despite the fact there are different ways that genocidal machines and leaders go about skinning the cat. It's an English proverb. There are so many ways to skin a cat. There is no gold standard, as Professor Soot rightly pointed out. The Burmese society, at this point in history, has lost its collective conscience. That is why there are only two enemies of the state, myself and Harn on that state. Out of 50 million people, we have only two enemies of the state. How disappointing. We should be having 20 million enemies of the state. Yeah? And so, we need very firm intervention. I'm not talking about military intervention. There are many ways to intervene to stop this, because my society, that my forefathers and mothers have helped build and fought for independence as Buddhists, as military personnel, have lost its social conscience. It cannot cure its cancer of racism without the medicine of intervention from outside. Thank you.
I'm sorry we are out of time. I was told that we have to break. So you can continue discussing this issue in the next session. Thank you very much. It's lunchtime.